growing about primary school pupils heading back to class on a daily basis. This as South Africa goes deeper into the third wave of COVID-19 infections. Dozens of schools have been shut down due to youngsters contracting the virus, but the Basic Education Department looks set to push ahead with its plan. The South African Democratic Teachers Union isn't pleased, though. Sadtu's Xolani Fakude joins us now live. Xolani, let's talk about why you are concerned about this move when the Basic Education Department reckons it's all systems go and it's safe.
Thank you very much, Shahan. First, let me greet you and let me greet the viewers as well on this cold evening. Firstly, Shahan, perhaps just to correct some of the articulation there as we're opening the discussion. We're not necessarily displeased with what the Department of Basic Education has announced. In fact, what we are saying as a South African Democratic Teachers Union is that we are not necessarily antagonistic towards the announcement of the Department of Education. However, our emphasis, Shahan, naturally, is that we want to make sure and emphasize that the standard operating procedures are always implemented at the school level. And we've already said that moving towards the 26th of July, because we are now effectively in the third wave, we are going to continuously monitor the situation on the ground with a hawk's eye, actually, Shahan. We are going to make sure that indeed, as the developments unfold, in as far as the third wave is concerned, at the very least, the impact at the schooling level is such that schools do not become the new problems. So we are playing a balancing act, Shahan. We are saying that we recognize and acknowledge the importance of education in this case. We know that we've already lost a lot of time. It has already frustrated us. We already know that scientifically, by the way, children are not necessarily the main problem. It's actually the adults. That is why we're even saying that there must be some kind of prioritization for education workers and teachers so that we can also deal with the anxiety ourselves that we're facing on a daily basis. That's our view, Shahan.
Yeah, but let's be realistic here, Xolani, because we know that even after the department made promises that there are proper systems in place to ensure the safety of teachers and learners, there were many schools that weren't ready and were complaining about the lack of processes in place. So how realistic can you be expecting grade Rs to 7 to actually go back to class? All those pupils, you reckon all the schools are going to be ready to handle those numbers?
Well, Shahan, I would never be in a position, even if I wanted to, in this particular case, to actually make that kind of a conclusion. That is why, Shahan, we are saying our issue as such is that there must always be a reliance on the science and the data that we're collecting on the ground. Ourselves as unions, we also work, by the way, with all the other unions. And we are going to be conducting our own surveys before, as we are approaching the 26th, so that we can make sure that we rely on the science and the data on the ground. Now, let me go back to the question that you asked. The track record of the Department of Basic Education. I can tell you with confidence, Shahan, that we started from a very, very low baseline, by the way. And it was us as the unions collectively that gave no less than 14 conditions to the Department of Basic Education to follow through so that we can make sure that schools do not become spreading centers. So the track record of the Department of Basic Education has been improving, but it is not necessarily all a rosy picture. That is why Shahan was saying, let us rely on the data and the science on the ground. Let us rely on consultation between all the stakeholders, especially between the department and ourselves as education workers. Let us also be transparent about the data that we're using, and then we will be able to get right. Now, also, Shahan, this is a differential approach, which means that other provinces might open, all the schools, the learners might come back, others might not. You're already seeing that in certain schools are already closing in the Northern Cape, where we're told, also in the Free State, as they were reaching the third wave, etc. So it's a differential approach. What is important is that let's monitor on the ground the situation very, very closely and rely on the science and the data, not political anecdotes.
But the Northern Cape said that 79 schools had to be closed because of infections there, right? So that, of course, means that we're seeing more and more pupils and teachers getting infected. Is that not a sign for Sadtu? Because I've seen so many people on social media say that the department is making a mistake by even thinking it can get to schools operating as per usual from the end of the month.
But now, Shahan, remember that teachers have already been in schools already. Schools shutting down, by the way, is already part of the standard operating procedure. Already remember, we identified that whereby there are problems and the numbers increased and also linking to the community infections, We've already said so. This is part of the standard operating procedure. That was already gazetted. So in the context of COVID, by the way, it is not an entirely new thing for schools to close. But what we want you to appreciate, Shahan, that there are also events. If you would have listened to the president yesterday, he was clear that the camps and some of the sporting activities were part of the problems. And that is why, by the way, we also called for those to be managed such that the COVID does not become a problem within the schools. So what matters, the science also tells us, by the way, that learners are not as much as at a higher risk, such as the adults. That is why we believe that in this country, let us have this discussion in a particular way and emphasize on the national question of we have already lost so much time in the education space. That is why we're saying let us vaccinate also the education workers, so that once we deal with the anxiety as education workers, then we can also even deal with the anxiety of the parents, the learners as well, within the context of the schooling community.
Yeah, but you know, this is supposed to come into effect by the 26th of July, right? I know you're talking about vaccinations, but the reality is if youngsters get this virus, they go home and possibly infect their grandparents who are at high risk. And given the slow pace of the vaccination process when it comes to these people over 60s, that could be a concern as well. The question is, I'm not going to go back and forth with this, the question then is, if by the 20th of July you're not satisfied with the way schools are carrying out measures or are prepared to carry out measures, will you go to the department and say, hold on, we have some concerns?
In fact, Shahan, I can tell you with utmost confidence that as a South African Democratic Teachers Union, we are going to be the very first ones to say so. Remember, Shahan, there was a time whereby last year we actually pushed back by no less than 2 months. It was actually us as Sadtu who said that there should be a particular delay for us to be able to understand what is happening here. That is why we're saying right now we're activating all our systems on the ground, because the health and safety of our teachers, the health and safety of our learners is absolutely sacrosanct. We are never going to compromise on that. That is why we're activating all our structures on the ground so that they can continue monitoring what is happening. We will be the first ones, Shahan, to make the most loudest noise to say that if the system is not ready to receive all the learners in a particular, within a particular a regular timetabling, therefore, we will be the first ones to say, let the department review an earlier pronouncements. We will be the first ones to say so, Shahan.
All right, I trust you will. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. That was Sadtu's Xolani Fakude.